Hi and welcome to the Law Center videocast. I'm Larry DeMarco, your host and founder of the Law Center, the largest network of the best trial lawyers in the country. And I'm also the founder of the Law Center YouTube channel, an online resource of free educational legal videos for self-represented litigants in child custody court. Go to the description portion of this video for more information. Today, we're here with a superstar, Dr. Gilda Carle. She's a business and relationship strategist. Her latest book is Real Men Don't Go Woke. Dr. Gilda, thank you for being a guest on the Law Center.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I think your work is exceptional, and I'm delighted to be sharing this time with you.
Thank you, and I love your book and delighted to have you here.
Thank
Tell
you.
us, tell us, why are you passionate about how society treats its men?
I'm a woman. I'm the recipient of all the dysfunctions, and I'm now recently a single woman. So it's even more emphasized that I see men coming through my door with all kinds of issues that have never been discussed before, that have never been even attacked in the tiniest way. If they're still angry at their ex-wife, I get it. If they're so pissed off at their kids, I get it. If they're so upset over what's happening in Iran, I get it. Because men are allowed to display their anger, because that is sanctioned in our culture, but women, of course, can't do that. So I am the recipient of all of this anger that has never, and because the culture has never taught men how to modulate it.
Tell us briefly about your book, Real Men Don't Go Woke.
Well, originally it had another title. I just kept doing research and more research, and I had 700 pages of writing. I couldn't believe that. I looked at this thing and I said, what? This is too much. Nobody's going to publish it. So I started narrowing it down. But then I went to a publisher and I said, I have your next bestseller. And she said, oh, the publishers won't publish an anti-woke book. I said, what? And I have had, this is my 19th book. So I have been around the block a couple of times. I have published with big publishers. I have published on Amazon. And now I did this other kind of publication because they would not publish it. And so I exposed them because of what recipient I was of all this information. I exposed them and I titled it, Real Men Don't Go Woke, but the subtitle is The Book They Would Not Publish, The Truth That Must Be Told. And I told the whole world about how they would not publish an anti-woke book. And that was major because nobody else is willing to speak out about it. My whole premise is that our men are dying. And what are they dying from? Killing themselves. Suicides are 4 times more likely in men than they are in women. What does that do to all of mankind? And what does that do to young boys growing up? I am living in Scottsdale, Arizona. My friends put on the most tremendous book signing. And I was talking about this. The place was packed with men and women. And I was talking about the suicide rate. And they thought, some of them looked at me like I had 2 heads. We all went home. The next morning, one of the attendees called me and said, you're not going to believe this. My best friend lost her 13-year-old son to suicide last night while you were telling us this information. And some of us were in disbelief. And here we are in our own backyard. Don't you think these young boys are seeing how the men are responding to our culture, being called toxic, being called no good, being shown up by all the women who are getting ahead, and feeling just without any possibility of a future? And when a 13-year-old commits suicide, there is something majorly wrong with our culture. So I had to write this book.
One thing that I loved about your book is that it was filled with star power. Tell us what was really behind Will Smith's outburst striking Chris Rock at the Oscars.
It was so many years, and I talk about Will Smith, who I think is a genius actor. Um, it's so many years of being put down and then surrounding himself with a wife who similarly put him down. When he was a young boy, he wanted to do rap. Rap music has all this saucy language. And his grandmother heard him. And she said, now, you can't be speaking that way if you're a gentleman. And he promised her, I am going to never do that again. So it was internalized. And he wants to be a rapper. He still wants. He's still playing with rapping. But he just didn't do that. As a result of that, he rapped. And he was called soft. Even on David Letterman's show, he said, I don't like being called soft. No man does. I was involved with a political campaign. Somebody was called, the person whose campaign it was called soft. He lost the election. Men being called soft are not the leaders that people want around them. So Will had a lot of problems in his heart that he never dealt with. And that's why I have in my book ways to get these emotions outside of you in a safe environment. And then when his wife got on television and talked about having her lover, who just happened to be her son, their son's friend, I mean, what is Will supposed to do? He was
Strike
well,
Chris
yeah,
Rock, I
that's right.
guess.
Well, that's what. So Chris wisely said about it, and it took him about a year to respond. He said it wasn't about me. It was about what his wife had hurt him with way before that.
Dr. Gilda, why do you call DEI initiatives emasculating for men?
When men are not, men or women, but we're talking about men now. When men are not promoted and given opportunities because of their merit, because of their hard work, then they turn around and look in the mirror and say, so why did I do this? Is that all there is to life? And that is emasculating. Look, I got my doctorate, I got my this, I got my that, I'm also working on an MBA, and I am told I can't get this job because I'm not black. That's emasculating. And that goes for men and women.
Can cancel culture be emotionally abusive to men?
Cancel culture is emotionally abusive, period. To men and women. If somebody doesn't like what you say, how do you know that? Unless they come back to you and say, I don't agree with that. A communicative, honest way of saying, I don't agree. Let's have a conversation. But if somebody just cuts somebody off, it's over. It's the end. And there is no recourse for that. You don't even know what you did wrong.
Who's really benefiting from woke ideology and who's being left behind?
Well, this is a hard question to answer because we won't know until there are longevity studies sometime down the road. But what we do know is that there are an awful lot of radical feminists out there who hate men. I've seen them. I don't know them. They're not my friends, but they don't like men. And it's unfortunate that some of them are mothers who are raising male children. So imagine how those young men are feeling about themselves if this is all that is inculcated into them.
Which male archetype do you see the most in today's dating culture?
Do I see the most, or are they in pretend mode? They all want to think that they're king. And that's an archetype, according to Carl Jung. But the reality is that women want men who are not on some pedestal, but honest and truthful. And not the warrior either. The lover comes close to it, but if he's all lover and no substance, that's not so good either. But what we don't want is the boy, because immaturity is not what women want. And I have this in the book, I felt it myself personally, and also the women who have been interviewed said, I have no patience for it. I'm out.
How do real men detox emotionally, and why don't they talk about it?
Real men won't talk about it because they're afraid that their reputation will be marred and they won't be looked upon as in charge, in control. And so they don't talk about how they're really feeling. Real men say, I would like to do XYZ. I don't feel as though I have enough experience. I'm going to try to do that and blah, blah, blah. And a real woman will stand behind her man or next to her man and say, I'm with you and I will help you.
How can vulnerability actually make a man more powerful?
By telling the truth, you've already won the game. If I, as a woman, am hearing some dialogue from a man who I know is being honest, who I know I can trust, then I feel protected. And isn't that what most women want? To feel protected by a man. I feel protected in truth. And I will bet you, if you were to do a survey now, ask women, how do you feel most protected?
If you could say one sentence to every lost man out there, what would it be?
We are all lost looking to be found. First find yourself, and then let us find you.
Gilda, your book is loaded with entertaining stories about celebrities. What can we learn from their public lives?
I chose to write about the celebrities because most people don't know their legislators' names. And they do know the names of the men that I use here. And I also have been writing and being quoted in the tabloids for so many years. I'm very familiar with some of their ups and downs. So I use these examples. And you never know how this is going to hit the public until the public hits you with information. And one man said to me, oh, outlining all the names of those men who have depression was so necessary for me to read. I had no idea that Simon Cowell, the big bad guy on television, is depressed. And he refused to go for help, which is typical of men. And I felt so much better. So men are telling me that I have hit the nail on the head, describing real men who they see on television with whom they can identify. And for that, thank you, God, I was led in the right direction.
Well, that certainly explains why Simon was so brutal to some mediocre or sub-mediocre contestants early in those seasons of America's Got Talent.
Right, right. He was very depressed. And when I outlined names of other guys who were similarly depressed.
That's my next question. Can you give us another superstar other than Simon Cowell?
Yeah.
Well, we all know Robin Williams, of course.
Robin
We know about
Williams.
that
Okay,
story.
so that's a good name. I didn't use him in the book. Unfortunately, he's gone too soon. But he was very depressed, and he dealt with it to the point that he couldn't take his new diagnosis, with his health problem, and he just committed suicide, adding to the statistics of men who can't deal with the pain and have to commit suicide instead. And then we could look at Elon Musk. He admits to having depression problems. And he was on, or has been on, many of the Wall Street men, and I've written about them, are taking ketamine to lower their anxiety. They're doing all kinds of things to lower their anxiety so that they can function better in the world and present once again to the world that they have everything handled, especially when they're dealing with everybody else's money. So they're under tremendous pressure, and the pressure is so great to deal with. But men in general, I have to add, feel that pressure. I have to support my kids. I have to support my ex-wife. I have to support the house. I have no money left. And for single women who are dating these men, all we hear are the stories. They're one big example of woundology. I am the victim. I have no money left, and I can't even support another family if I wanted to.
The gist of your book is that men are lost, and largely because of woke culture as well. Why?
I can't tell you that women are not somewhat responsible for this. I can't say that men are not somewhat responsible for this. What I do, especially at the end, is one Gen Z said, you wrapped it all together in the end, saying that if women want to have men who are all the things that they say they want, then they're going to have to make the environment safer for men to talk about how they feel. And women are not off the hook in this. To think that a man comes all prepared, readily wrapped up in a bow, in a box, ready to go out into the world, no. He doesn't know how you will react. He is terrified of how a woman will react, especially a strange woman. He doesn't know what's going to happen next. Is he going to be kicked out? Is he going to be canceled? Or is she going to say, he tried to rape me? And we have plenty of those stories going on in our organization.
So now that we've identified the problem, what's the solution, and what advice do you have for single men?
Well, it's interesting what's happening to the Gen Z men. As the women are becoming more and more woke and sticking to that, the men are becoming more conservative. Now, as somebody who gives advice for a living, these guys are moving away from these women. They want nothing to do with these woke women. They want to be real men, and they want to express their real feelings. And the women are coming to me and saying, how do I find a guy? I am at my wit's end. I can't find a guy. Well, of course not. If you squash him, he's not stupid. He's not going to come back for more. You can't abuse him as though you would abuse a rag doll. You have to talk to him. And one of the things that women haven't mastered yet, I don't know if they'll ever master that. And I say they, because I'm not in that realm. I hope. I've been therapied out of that. One of the things the most beautiful thing you can do for somebody is to listen. And listen to this guy. Listen to what he says. When I heard that $20 million is going to be spent to study men as though they're in a petri dish. Come on.
You're talking about the Democratic Party
The
now with their messaging.
Thank you. Yes.
For our listeners who aren't aware, go ahead.
Okay. They're going to study men to find out how the Dem men can be more like, what, the Republican men? They won't dare say that. But they want to know how to get these men back. Well, how about listening to them? They've told me everything I needed to know. Instead of spending $20 million, you could have spent less than $20 on this book, and I have all the research done for you.
Gilda, you've been saying that you talk to a lot of people. Tell us what you do, what coaching you give, what you do for men and women.
Well, it's all strategy coaching. I coach people who are heads of companies, heads of state, heads of countries, and heads of households. I speak to everybody from all walks of life and all over the world. So if I hear that a man is slapping around his wife in one country, and he then visits our country and tells me he slapped around his new girlfriend in our country, I have to tell him culturally that's not acceptable here. That's not the way we communicate here. So I'm dealing with everybody's cultural issues, which is fascinating to me. But bottom line, every single person wants somebody they can trust.
With your permission, I'm going to get into a lightning round because you have so much exciting content. Ready?
Okay. Yes.
Great. What's the one emotion most men are terrified to admit they feel?
Well, it's fear. Fear is terrifying because once a man admits that he's fearful, he is, in his mind, admitting that he's weak. And that's a no-no in our culture.
Why do you say that anger is often just fear in disguise?
Anger is really fear and depression acted outward. What happens is that a man can't admit that he's depressed. A man can't admit that he is lonely. A man can't admit that he is having issues with any interpersonal problem with a woman at work, wherever, because he is fearful of being called weak or soft and unable to handle what men are supposed to handle. And so the culture has served men very poorly. It's unfair, and yet they have to get around it somehow. And so they have all kinds of mechanisms that I describe in my book.
What does male shame really look like, and where does it come from?
Well, since men are not allowed in our culture to describe how shamed they are, it's major embarrassment that they're not good enough. And they're not allowed to describe that. So instead, they go ahead and act overconfident or over-aggressive. And the shame is probably deep, deep, deep down, buried from a family situation, from their growing up. Somehow they weren't picked for the team, or the girl of their dreams rejected them. And they're carrying around that shame because we have never given men an opportunity to express themselves honestly and truthfully.
How does society respond when a man admits he's lonely?
When a man admits he's lonely, who is he admitting it to? First of all, in essence of what I do, men have to admit that they're lonely to themselves. They have to admit, I am feeling lonely. Because unless you admit what's going on inside you, you are unable to act in any way to ameliorate those problems and those feelings.
What happens when a man loses his sense of purpose?
Oh, what happens when anybody loses a sense of purpose is that they go downhill all at once. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. If you don't have a purpose, when you wake up in the morning, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do that. A woman just recently said to me, I just quit my job. I feel so free. But now I have no purpose. And now I'm feeling depressed. It's the same for men. The same thing. Men more so than women, perhaps, because men are taught that they're the breadwinner. And that goes back for so many years, even though women are making more money and getting more jobs than they've ever gotten. But still, men feel guilty and shamed that they're not living up to the standards that society has expected of them.
My favorite question for you, what do you mean when you say real men don't go woke?
Well, here's what happens to men. They walk out the door, they're immediately called toxic. It doesn't matter who the man is, doesn't matter what he did, where he comes from, he is toxic. And he starts every single second of the day trying to say, but I'm not, but I'm not, but I'm not. So what happened in our culture is that here was the toxicity, and men went in the opposite direction, the way the pendulum before it finds its modicum, goes from one extreme to the other. And they went woke, meaning they went voiceless and spineless and incommunicado. Why? Because every time they opened their mouth, they were canceled, they were cut down, they were castrated, and they were told they didn't matter. So they're shutting up. And that's the problem today.
So, what advice would you have for a man who is old school?
You know, the book has a section because I just don't talk about the problems. I talk about, so what do you do about this? And there's a section about getting rid of that emotional toxicity. And that's answering questions to yourself in the privacy of your own home. Answer questions. What are my feelings? What are my fears? When was the last time I was pissed off? And what did I do about it? Did I express it? Or has it lingered and making me feel as though, well, it's never been expressed. And that is very dangerous. Where do you think all the suicides come from? They come from internalizing all these emotions that never got out. And it's like a warm bottle of champagne. You shake it, the cork pops, and then you don't even know what's happening.
I have a two-part question for you. First of all, what is the new masculine ideal?
The new masculine ideal, according to my book, and my book has been called the New Bible for Men, so I'm just stating that. The new masculine ideal is to be strong, determined, express yourself honestly, no people pleasing. That's the biggest problem that we're having right now in interpersonal relationships, this people pleasing, just to be loved. But express yourself and then let people know what your feelings are. That means you have to be vulnerable. And that seems to still be a dirty word for most men. Demonstrate your vulnerability. You're a human being, for God's sake. You're not an automaton.
So the next part of my question was, how are men punished for not fitting the new ideal?
Men are indeed punished when they don't conform to what the women out there who they're surrounding themselves with don't like how they're conforming. Look, I'll tell you, the 30-year-olds who wouldn't publish, who are in charge of the publishing industry, who would not publish any anti-woke book like this book, are all complaining to me. I give advice. And my advice is not, well, I think you ought to do this. I think you ought to do... I am a strategist. If you do X, then Y will happen. If you do Y, the studies are telling us that Z will happen. So what people have to do is to express themselves honestly. And the women, I talk to women as well and tell them, it's up to you to make a man feel safe so he's not going to be cut down and castrated. Now that's up to the women, and they have a big role in this as well. Nobody gets off the hook in this. We have a mess going on in our interpersonal relationships, and it's not just the men who have shut down, but it's the women who must make it a safe environment so they can speak up.
Can a man be strong and sensitive, or is sensitive still taboo?
Any woman who says that they don't want a sensitive man doesn't know what she's talking about. These are the same women who are complaining to me that the guy doesn't talk. He doesn't express himself. He's not honest. I have no idea whether he really wants to go to the movies or he's just trying to please me. We want sensitive men. We don't want men crying hysterically, of course. But we want men who are sensitive. Sensitive, number one, to our needs. So sensitive men are a big plus. It's not a curse to be a sensitive man.
But are we raising a generation of people-pleasing men?
Oh, the people pleasing has gotten out of hand. I went out, now that I'm single, I went out with a guy who said, I'm a people pleaser, thinking he was going to get strokes from me. I said, well, that's a deal breaker. And he said, what do you mean? I said, people pleasers kiss ass in order to be loved and to get what they want. I can't deal with that. I need somebody to tell me whether I love you or not for it. I need you to tell me the truth so I know whether you're a straight shooter or not. And then I can respond.
How did he take that advice? Did he respond okay?
We're not seeing each other anymore.
I understand. Why is silence often a man's coping mechanism?
Well, we have taught men if you open your mouth, you're toxic. So shut up. And that's what they do. And then women are hitting them hard for being silent. Well, darling women out there, you can't have it both ways. There's only one way to go, and that's transparency.
So I want to finish on a little positive note. In your book, you give great examples of men who have succeeded in turning pain into purpose. Please give us an example.
I have so many guys that I have listed in this book who did exactly that. And I called it Real Men Who Stand Up. And some of them, one of them, like Dr. Dr. Jordan Peterson, for example,
Love him.
he lost he lost his psychology license. He lost his university standing. I spoke to him when he came to Phoenix to do a presentation for all of us.
I envy you. He's my hero.
Yeah, he is heroic. And he gave up everything. And they said, well, he had to do a mea culpa. He said, I'd rather die than do that. No way. And he stood very tall and he said, no, I am not doing that. I am going to do my truth. And you gotta love a guy like that. I mean, you just have to love a guy. Kevin Sorbo, I spoke to him in New York, and he came to visit our prayer group. And we had this media prayer group, and he was talking about how miserable he was in Hollywood because they were canceling him and they were cutting him down and they were refusing to give him movie roles. And in the book, I talk about this guy played Hercules. You're going to mess with Hercules? What he did, though, and these are all examples that men can follow. What he did was to get up, leave Hollywood, go down to Florida to live, and now he's doing faith-based movies.
Love them.
He's wonderful. He's
Yes,
wonderful.
he is. Well, you named two of my favorite people, and thanks for that. Before we close, please tell us how our viewers can learn more about you.
Oh, very simple. Come to my website, drgilda.com, drgilda.com. I am on everything from LinkedIn to X to Instagram to TikTok to Facebook. I'm on everything. So it's easy to find me. But you really have to be willing to do the work yourself. Going to be gaining any kind of, no, I want to start that again. Come talk to me, but you're not going to make any progress unless you're willing to look at yourself long and hard in the mirror and say, I know what I have to do. And I'm doing it because I love myself.
Very good. Gilda, thank you so much for that. And that's all we have time for now. And I want to thank you for being a guest on the Law Center videocast.
Thank you so much, Larry.
We've been here with Dr. Gilda Carle, and I am your host, Larry DeMarco. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and comment, and click the notification bell next to subscribe to be alerted of new videos. This has been brought to you by the Law Center, the largest network of the best trial lawyers in the United States. Go to the description portion of this video where you can learn more about Dr. Gilda Carle, the Law Center Attorney Network, and the Family Court Custody Boot Camp. Signing off. Tune in next time. Bye for now.